CQ, the old friends net for 160 meters. This is N4LQ, Steve in Shelby, North Carolina. The old friends net is a AM amplitude modulation net. If you'd like to join us, feel free to do so. Anybody and everybody is welcome. And if you'd like to check in, call N4LQ now. And if you'd like to check in, call
N4LQ, this is KO4CTM.
Well, there's somebody, KO4CTM. Hello again, Jim. Good to hear you. You're sounding good tonight. And let's see who else would like to check in. This is N4LQ. Give me a call. What a massive pileup. Okay. Well, we'll keep hanging in there and somebody will show up here in a little while. Meanwhile, we'll just hold the fort, as it were. And I'm running the LMAC AF67, driving the AL82 tonight. A little bit more power than the Novo 75 was running. But I enjoy that rig, and I'll be using it more often. I'm going to get in there and work on that power. If I can get 2 more watts out of it, it'll drive the amplifier to over 200. It's amazing. It doesn't take much power. But if I go down to 3715, like we do in the old friends net, I can get that power, no problem. But it tapers off up there and there's no adjustment for it. So we're going to look into that. So how's it going over there in the Climax? KO4CTM, N4LQ.
N4LQ, KO4CTM. Yeah, very good, Steve. That little thing was sounding good earlier on 80 meters. I mean, for something that's as simple, I guess, as it is, it was doing a great job. It had good audio, and I guess you said you could have tweaked it a little bit with the tone and whatever knobs that are on it, but you know, I mean, I couldn't really tell you anything in particular about the audio other than it sounded good. So but yeah, for such a simple little transmitter or transceiver or whatnot, I thought it sounded good. So interesting, I guess, that it's a little different in power on a different frequency, but I guess that makes sense to some extent. And since there's no adjustment, then I guess you have to do something else. But yeah, of course, just running the Viking 1 here and receiving on the Hallicrafters SX101, and still using the new and improved long wire. I guess it's, you know, it's almost, I guess it's almost like a maybe an inverted V, or I don't know, maybe even a dipole or whatnot. It's got the 135-foot leg, and excuse me, and then it comes into the 9-to-1 unun, and then, you know, I ran the counterpoise out. I don't even know what the length of that is. It's probably a good 40 or 50 feet maybe. And the 135-foot element it slopes up probably, the feed point's probably about 25 feet. The 135-foot section goes up to probably 45 or 50 feet, and then the counterpoise is probably at about 15 or 20 feet. So it's almost like an inverted V or or so, but it seems to be doing halfway decent, so we're going to go with it for now and see what happens down the line. So back to you, N4LQ, KO4CTM.
All right, do we have anybody else that would like to check in? Call now, it's N4LQ. I guess, Jim, what you got there is pretty close to a quarter wave at 135 feet, and you do have an impedance situation there. That antenna almost matches the coax without the 9-to-1 unin. Now, we're talking probably 40 to 50 ohms, maybe a little less, is what it would be. The unin then divides that by 9, and you're ending up with 6 ohms or so feeding the coax, and then you have a tremendous mismatch, lots of power loss in pretty much everything, especially the unin and the coax. So it stands to reason that you'd be much better off without the unin. Now, if you were operating some other band where the impedance at the end of that wire is high, then it would make a little more sense. But as it is, all you need is to hook the center of the coax to the wire and the shield to your counterpoise. And you could actually trim the length of that wire, and you probably wouldn't have to cut much off for it to resonate it right here on this frequency. And boy, then you'd have a perfect SWR. Your efficiency would skyrocket in comparison to what you've got, and I think you'd be really pleased with it. Anyway, yeah, this is the Novo 75, and then there was also a kit called the Retro 75 that is easy to confuse with this. It's a lot different, and I guess they still sell those, I'm not sure. But it's kind of similar in size. I think it's mostly a circuit board. I guess, I don't know if they sold a cabinet for it or not. So, and then there's this Chinese thing that I was talking about that it's $115. It's all modes, including FM, AM, upper lower sideband, CW. A little less than 5 watts on the average, about 4.5, 5 watts, and covers every band from 80 through 10. So that's that looks pretty interesting. It's a pain to use. It's full, menu-based type thing, but yeah, who cares for that kind of money? Once you get it set up, you got it made. So, one more time, does anybody else want to check in? This is N4LQ.
N4LQ, WB4NKL. Started checking the last go around, but I forgot to turn the transmitter on, so it had to warm up. Good evening, it's WB4NKL.
It's kind of a funny feeling. Well, good evening, Cliff, WB4NKL. Go ahead and take it away. Tell us what you've been up to this afternoon, N4LQ.
Well, didn't get a whole lot more done. Went in and Linda had a roast cooked up with some vegetables on it, and mashed potatoes and corn and slaw. Pretty good meal. She'd been in there cooking all afternoon while I'd been out here kicking around in the radio shop, so that was a good deal. And I did come back out and hook the LMAC up to 12 volts, and it worked fine. I didn't talk to anybody, but looked good on the watt meter. Put out a little more power on 12 or 13.8 is what I had run into it. put out a little more power. It's about 36 watts on the AC, and switched it over to DC, and it's doing a good solid 40 watts. And looked like, closest I could read on that 50 amp meter, looked like it was about 3 amps or so on standby, and 8 amps keyed down. So that sort of surprised me. I was looking for more current than that, but must be pretty efficient vibrator circuit. 8 amps total there, keyed down. So back to you, Steve. N4LQ, WB4NKL.
Well, that's about 50% efficiency, I think. 100 watts, a little more than 100 watts in, and 50 watts power input. And you're getting 40 watts out, so that's pretty good. I guess creating your own AC. Does it make a lot of noise?
Some vibrator noise. I don't know if it's going out over there or not, or electrically, but you can hear it buzzing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I remember our 55 Dodge. You start the engine up and turn the radio on, and it sit there and hum for a while, and until it warmed up the tubes, and then out come the music. So that was the old days. Well, that's great. Anybody else want to check in? This is N4LQ. All right. Well, good food, good radios. What more could you ask for? KO4CTM. Go ahead and take it, then give it to Cliff. N4LQ.
N4LQ and WB4NKL. Yeah, very good. Cliff, I didn't hear anything on my end. Of course, I don't have, there's no super high-tech receiving here on this end like Steve's got there on his SDR or whatnot. I'm just receiving on the SX101, so your signal sounds good into climax this evening. Yeah, Steve, I'll have to look into doing something different. I built the 9-to-1 unknown and threw it on there because that wire at one point in time was pretty short. It was just a random wire, random length, and I built that and threw it on there. And my Yaesu 991 Alpha, with that antenna, I could tune pretty much 40 and 20 and 10 and whatever with the internal tuner, and it worked fine. And that was the initial purpose of that antenna. And then, of course, when I decided that I wanted to try and get down here on 160, I went ahead and extended it and whatnot, and just ran it the same way I'd been running it. So, yeah, I could probably, I've got some coax here. I could probably just strip one end of that and take the connector off and just go directly into the wire and probably be good. So I'll have to contemplate that and take a look at it. But yeah, I got motivated when we got off earlier there on 80, and went in here and cooked for the XYL, and we had a fish fry, so I baked some salmon and have made some fries and some hush puppies, and I meant to make some slaw, and then I didn't ever get around to that. But we had a good dinner there, some baked salmon and fries and hush puppies. So yeah, I was pretty hungry when we got off of the other conversation there on 80. So I had to go scare up some food, and she had just gotten out of work, and she wasn't really in the mood for cooking, and I said, okay, I'll take care of it. So that was the story here. So I gave her a fish fry for the evening. So good to hear you again, Cliff. Go ahead, WB4NKL, KO4CTM.
Okay, Jim, KO4CTM. It's WB4NKL. I'm running the standard old Globe King here tonight. I'm not on that little LMAC, but I might try it on 12 volts there in the morning and see what kind of reports I get. See if I hear any vibrator hash feeding through. I remember those days, the car radio, Steve. I had a aunt that she drove a '55 Chevy, and she was a cook at the elementary school where I went to school, and she'd stop and pick me up in the mornings, and I remember that well, her flipping on that radio, and heard the hum come up, and then a few 15 or 20 seconds later, the local radio station popped in. But good memories. It's sort of like the blue glow and the mercury vapor rectifiers, I guess. That's nostalgia hearing that vibrator hum. But it was so what they used for years. I guess it did a pretty good job. I know that was one of the high failure parts of the car radios was the vibrator and the OZ4 rectifiers and all that. But like I say, they did a good job for years. Not much else going. Been working on a little project here. Experiment. I'm building an upverter, solid state. I'm going to go in on 75 meters and upvert to the CB band. So take an old CB rig and put this converter ahead of it and have 75 meter receive. And I found a crystal here. If I can get it to work, 3880 or 3715 will come in on channel 1, and 3885 is on channel 10 or so. So be channelized also if I can get this crystal to operate where I want it to. N4LQ, WB4NKL.
All right. And got anybody else that'd like to check in? Call now.
WF2U.
Well, there he is. We've been wondering what happened to you, Amir. WF2U, go ahead and take it and give it back to me.
Roger, N4LQ, and whoever else is here. I heard Cliff. This is WF2U. Well, good evening. Finally, I'm joining this August audience or crowd here again. And yeah, I was a little busy for a couple of days, and then the night we had thunderstorms. I didn't come out the evening with the rain. We had really pretty close thunderstorms here. Steve, you're 20, 25 over 9. Cliff, you're also about 20 over 9. I came out a little bit late here, but the bed seems to be all right. Not brilliant, but somewhat okay. It's not very noisy, at least. So, back to you, Steve. N4LQ, WF2U.
Okay, WF2U, N4LQ. Anybody else want to check in? Come now.
4 Bravo, KZ4B, over.
KZ4B, N4LQ. And it sounds like you're on AM tonight. Go ahead and take it and give it back to me, John.
Steve, well, maybe I'm hitting a little too hard here. I promise not to do any FM tonight. I got the mic straightened out. I'm going between two extremes. Without the amp, it's not enough, and with the amp, it's too much. So I'll try to show some restraint. Get the distance right here anyway. Hope it's not picking up too much background noise. But anyway, you guys are booming in here. Conditions are quite excellent tonight, and your audio is great. Since I got in late, tell me what you're using, Steve. You're really hammering it nicely. So back to you, N4LQ in the group, KZ4B, over.
All right. Let's see, 220 watts carrier. That's what I'm running, John. AF67 driving the AL82 and the end-fed half-wave antenna. That's about it. And you're doing okay tonight. Good, strong signal. And yeah, no FM. Well, at least I know how to handle it. Next time, I'll just push the button up here and switch to FM. And that's funny. Billy out there, KO4SSY, was listening, and he sent me a text. He said, I'm picking him up fine on FM. So anyway, Mir, we are not August operators. We are February operators. Anyway, and yeah, the vibrator power supply. Now, Jim, you probably don't remember cars. So you may have run into an old car that had a tube-type car radio, but they all use the vibrator power supply. And here's how it works. You got your car battery. The car battery comes into to the vibrator, and the vibrator is like a relay gone crazy. It turns itself on, it closes, and as soon as it closes, it says, whoops, I'm opening back up, and it just closes again and opens and closes and opens. And the result is it produces sort of a square wave, and that's, of course, pulsating DC. Then we go from there into a transformer, because now it's capable of doing something to a transformer, and it gets stepped up in voltage, and the voltage comes out to a couple of 100 volts, where it is then rectified, and we're back to DC, but it's high voltage DC this time, and then it's filtered, and then we have the plate voltage. And of course, the filament voltage just comes straight around all that from the battery. So that's how a vibrator power supply works. And all the car radios had them from, I don't know who had the first transistor car radio. It was probably a Motorola, and it was probably in the early 50s. And as soon as they came out, the old tubes went away, but they were amazingly, the two car radios were just amazing how well they held up. And of course, vibrators were something you had to buy, and they had usually like 4 pins, 3 or 4 pins, and they just unplugged, and it just looked like a metal tube, but inside was this, the vibrator itself was wrapped in foam rubber. That helped keep some of the noise down. And of course, there was all kinds of means taken to eliminate the hash that they produced. Usually a bunch of bypass capacitors here and there to keep that out of the receiver. And sounds good. The roast you made and the corn. So you are the chief cook and bottle washer there at the house, I guess, Jim. So here's the order. N4LQ, KO4CTM, and then WB4NKL, and then WF2U, and then KZ4B. And unless somebody else checks in, it's back to me. Let's see if there's anybody else who wants to check in. All right, go ahead, Jim. KO4CTM to take it. N4LQ.
Yeah, very good, Steve. I guess the car vibrator circuits there are a little before my time. I guess I was more of a 60s I guess by then they'd all gone to transistors or whatever. Yeah, I don't have any recollection of anything like that, but interesting all the same, and that's an interesting way to do it for sure. But good evening to Amir and John. I don't know, I guess Landrum, South Carolina, I guess there must be something in between you and I, Amir. A lot of times I struggle to hear you, but I was able to copy it, but obviously there's some noise as well. But John, I heard you fine. Yeah, a little light, but I could pick up. It was good copy. But yeah, so I just decided to go ahead and cook the dinner, and like I said, after I got off the short QSO there with you and Cliff on 80 meters, I was like, okay, I got to find some food here. So I took things into my own hands and did that rather quick dinner. But yeah, as I said earlier, I mean, I've been working on this DX 100 and slowly going through those circuits and checking everything there. And other than that, it's been a pretty nice day. I think it's going to get a little chilly this evening, and I think some rain is supposed to move in tomorrow and probably, I think, also Saturday. So we'll see about all that. But hopefully it won't be too bad. But so I'll send it on to Cliff. So WB4NKL, take it away. KO4CTM.
KO4CTM, it's WB4NKL. Okay, Jim. Yeah, that was, I guess there was a step between the vibrator radios and the solid state radios. They come out with those space charged tubes that run off of 12 volts on the plate. So they had those radios for, 3 or 4 years, I guess. I know Chevrolet, I think, went 57. They went to those. But they had tubes that actually operated off of 12 volts on the plate, and then they used a big old power transistor for the audio stage that run. They must have had it biased Class A. I know they run so hot the heat sink could about burn you, but they sounded pretty good too. Pretty good radios, but I think in '59, that was the last year, they probably went to all solid state after that, 60. That's in the Chevy line. I'm more familiar with those. I own more of those than anything else, I guess, over the years. But I think the rest of the car manufacturers are about on the same timeline. And they had another way of getting voltage for transmitters, motor generators or dynamotors that they took in low voltage DC and run a motor that run a generator that generated the high voltage. When I first went to work for the railroad, they still had some Motorola units on cabooses that still used those at 12 volts in and about 400 out that run a 30-watt tube-type transmitter. And they had a vibrator for the receiver. The radios was in 3 separate boxes. There was a power supply box, a transmitter box, and a receiver box. And the railroad didn't spend money upgrading too fast, so they still used those on cabooses for a few years after I went to work. So a lot has changed in the last 50 years or so. Go ahead, John. KZ4B, WB4NKL.
Cliff, I didn't hear earlier. I assume it's this John, correct, Blake?
I think it went to you and then to Mir.
Okay. I was thinking I followed Mir, but that's okay. Not a problem. You're booming in. Sound great. And speaking of car radios, when I was a teenager, I built a portable radio out of a 1955 Buick Roadmaster radio that had a huge speaker built into the radio. And of course, it was being a 55, it was a vibrator based radio. It had two 6B6s in the audio output, and it was a fantastic, it was push-button radio. It was fantastic sounding. And I hauled that all over everywhere. I mean, it was fantastic audio. And I was at the beach one year, and there was a drunk guy that I refused to give him any more beer because he was way beyond the limit. And he got mad at me and pissed on the radio, and that killed it. But it was a great sounding thing, and it was relatively compact. I mean, it was all speaker, but it really sounded good. And I also had a stainless steel. I don't know if you've ever seen the inside of a Roadmaster. I got the steering wheel out of that same junk car and put it in my 36 Ford Coupe. It was a beautiful stainless steel steering wheel. And neat stuff. And then later, I had a Blaupunkt solid state radio in my Triumph TR8, which I still have, but it's parked and needs work. And that was a great sounding radio. So, but it was in the car, so it wasn't a portable radio, except it was only as portable as the car was. But those were the days. And I am looking for a vibrator that will handle enough current to go in the 1070 multi-LMAC power supply. I don't know if there is such a thing, because it would have to dissipate, I guess, a lot of heat. I don't even know if such a vibrator exists, but if it did, I wouldn't mind having it. Although what I do is that power supply also takes 115 volts, and you can get a external solid state power supply about 200 watt all day long. It's very compact. It's modified sine wave. It's not true RMS, but it works great. And they're like $40 a piece or less. So a raging bargain. Probably the vibrator, if I found it, would cost more than that because it'd be a valuable antique. So that's my 2 cents worth. And I guess if it went to me, then I need to pass it on to Mir. And you're sounding good tonight, Mir. Everybody's sounding good. Tim, you're the weakest of the bunch, but totally Q5. And nice to talk to you tonight. So W2F2U and the group KZ4B, over.
Roger, KZ4B and the group, this is WF2U. Yeah, very good, John. You're booming in here. You're 30 over 9. You started out about 25 when you first came in, and when you first checked in, and now you are about 30 over 9. Really crazy good signal. And Steve also went up. So you're about the same signal strength, both of you. And Cliff, you sound good too. You are 20 to 25 over 9. And let's see, Jim, you are a little bit lighter. You are between S7 and S8, but I copy you 100%. Noise level is a little bit higher than the usual quiet, about S4 normally. It's about S5, almost 6 for some reason, but there is no static whatsoever. I actually checked the lightning map to see whether it's worth coming out here to the shack, and not too noisy predictably, but all the thunderstorms are pretty far. They're way west around. Let's see, around way on the other side of Alabama and all that. So it shouldn't be interfering at all. And I'm running the DX100 Bravo, 100 watts carrier, and of course peaking up to the appropriate peak envelope power with modulation, and receiving on the National NC300. The antenna is the usual end-fed halfway for 80 meters. So didn't do much. I was busy with the dogs both days. Had nice herding sessions yesterday morning and this morning. This morning was a little bit chilly, but then it warmed up. After that, I had some stuff to do around, and yesterday I also had to go to Greer with 3 dogs to the canine chiropractor to get their monthly adjustment. So I was running around yesterday, and I hope the Gonset G76 is going to be on the air by the 4 p.m. Old Friends Net. So with that, it goes to, I guess it goes back to Steve. Steve, go ahead. N4LQ, this is WF to you.
All right. We got things switched around a little bit, so I'll put Mayor after John. All right, so go NKL, then KZ4B, and then F2U. Anybody else want to check in? Give me a call, N4LQ. All right. Well, let's see here. I was trying to think back. Of course, being the nature that I am, as a kid, I was interested in things like car radios. I was interested in fans for some reason, and even when I was 4 and 5 years old, I was collecting little fans. People would give them to me because they knew I liked them. I had a whole row of them down the basement. Used to like to play with them. You can do a lot of things with fans. You can stick things in them and make different noises, and try to hold them with your finger, and you can talk through them, and it changes your voice. All kinds of tricks. But and vacuum cleaners and car radios came later. But let's see. Dad had a 50 Buick, 49 Buick, a 50 Buick. We had a 53 Buick and a 55 Ford, 58 Ford. Dad liked to trade cars. Of course, cars didn't last but a couple of years back in those days. Started falling apart. A 55 Dodge. All those had vibrators as far as I can remember. And then we got a 60 Buick. And I'm pretty sure that was solid state, or at least it acted like one. Came right on quick. Of course, if it had those low voltage tubes, they came on pretty quick too. So I'm not really sure what was in that thing. Never saw it, never had any trouble with the radios. They all worked. And so, let me ask you a question, Cliff. A motor generator versus a dynamotor. Could it be possible that dynamotor was a brand name or a sort of a trade name or something? And because as far as I know, a dynamotor is a motor generator or a type of them, I guess. Anyhow, talk about noisy. of course, Mirror's got those all over the place. So I'm sure you know a lot about those. Now, as far as that antenna of yours, Jim, I would just leave the PL259, just unscrew it from the unun, and if you've got an old SO239, just screw that onto the end of it, hook the center of it to the wire antenna and the flange mount to the counterpoist, and tie it together with a string and duct tape, and you're done. That's all there is to it. Check your SWR, find out where it resonates, start trimming it down a little bit until you get here, and it's probably going to have a nice low SWR, and you may not even need to tune it at all, and then you'll be running with the pack, man. You won't believe how much better it works. Now, this LMAC, it keeps creeping power up on me. Now, how does it do that? I don't know. Can't figure it out. Something in there is changing power. Anyhow, go ahead, Jim. KO4CTM, N4LQ.
4LQ in the group. Yeah, very good, Steve. I've got some of those old PL 259s around, and I'll just see what I can rig up there. Right now, I mean, it's showing of course, I'm running through the tuner, but it's showing, probably about 100 and, I don't know, about maybe 110 or 120, 110 watts on voice peaks out, and the FWR is, I think, 1.5 to 1, so it's not doing too bad the way it is, but, it can always be better, so I'm all good with trying to make things better, but, yeah, I don't, the cars I remember my dad having, I think he had a 60, I don't know, I want to say a 60 Ford Galaxy maybe. And then the one I remember the most, I think, is like a 65 Chrysler New Yorker. I mean, that thing was like, it was like a little two-door coupe, I think, New Yorker, and that thing would fly. I mean, that was a good old car. But yeah, I guess I was a few years past the car stage that at least you, Steve, went through. So I don't remember any 50s. Of course, I've got a 69 Firebird out here that I'm trying to fix that belonged to my dad, and but yeah, I like the older cars. The older the better. They're easy to work on, and you can climb into the engine compartment and do whatever you have to do, and you can buy the parts, and yeah, you don't have to spend an arm and a leg trying to keep them up. But it's sort of like the old radios, right? You don't, parts are not too crazy if you can get a hold of them, and you just keep fixing them and keep using them. That's the best way to go with everything. So on to you, Cliff. WB4NKL. This is KO4CTM.
KO4CTM. It's WB4NKL. Okay, Jim. That sounds like an interesting project, the 69 Firebird. I had a 67 Camaro, sort of the same size vehicle, and I wished I still had. It's a 327 4-speed, but it's gone many, many, many years. And a lot of those old vehicles, I wish they were still around. I think my first car was a 64 Oldsmobile Cutlass F85. I can't think they called it back in the day, that I bought used with my summer job at the had a pepper mill over here. They can pepper, so I worked over there in the summer and got enough money to buy a 64 Oldsmobile, and I wished I had it too. John, what brought all this vibrator talk on is was the 1070 power supply. I've got one over here that I fired up on 12 volts, and it works. Had to, well, I don't know, somebody had rebuilt the thing before I got it. All the capacitors had been changed, and I don't know if they replaced the vibrator or what, but I fired it up on 12 volts, and it took right off. And it's pulling about 3 amps or so on standby and about 8 amps on transmit. And then I was telling Steve it puts out a little more power on 12 volts or 13.8 than what it did on the 120 volt side of it. The voltages are just a little higher, I guess, coming out of the transformer with the vibrator. But it works. I haven't had it on the air yet, but I think I will try it just to see if any of the hash is getting through, or see if anybody can detect it. But yeah, that was what brought on all this talk. KZ4B is WB4NKL.
Okay, WB4NKL and the group KZ4B. Fine business there, Cliff. That's really interesting. I've got 3 1070s, and I haven't tried any of them on 12 volts. I run them all on 115, and with varying levels of success. But it would be so neat. I guess you could build a substitute for the vibrator, but I'm just thinking it might have to dissipate so much heat that nobody could come up with a plug-in vibrator to handle that much current. That's an interesting thing. I've got a plug-in vibrator, solid state, that I have nothing to use it in, but it's designed for any rig up to 5 watts, and that won't do it. But interesting topic. Shifting gears, my son, Mary, talked about some medical treatment for his dogs. My son bought a beautiful gray and bluish, I forget the name of the breed cat. He had to ship it all the way from Ukraine, and it looks just like a lynx, but the thing had a urinary tract infection, and my son ended up spending, he originally confessed to $7,000, but it ended up being closer to $10,000 on the cat before it died. The University of South Carolina has some kind of a veterinary specialist for cats, and it was $1,500 a night if the cat had to stay overnight, plus the cost of the operation. So the money was flying out the window, and then the cat, they couldn't save it. But it was a beautiful animal, and very well, it had a great disposition. It was a real shame. I'm not much of a cat guy. I'm more of a dog person. But that was one good-looking cat. And so shifting gears again, back to the car situation. I had a car that is worth a fortune now, and I sold it to get my first Corvette. I had a 1968 V28 Camaro, blue with white stripes. And the car got stolen, and I had it put back together. They didn't torch it or tear it apart to the point where the insurance couldn't rebuild it. But I had them go from a M21 Muncie transmission to an M22 rock crusher. And later I added Saginaw power steering. None of the Z28s came with power steering or air conditioning. And you could do without air conditioning, because you could roll the windows down and go as fast as you needed to cool things off. But the steering was a different situation. It was a fast ratio, so you didn't have any mechanical advantage. And so I went, in '69 they came out with a fast ratio power steering, even on a Z28, so I bought the parts and converted it. And that was like the difference between night and day. But that's a car that I don't miss, because it was so highly tuned that you had no torque until you were doing 3,000 RPM, and then it would go bananas between 3,000 and the red line at 6,500. But, you know, you do all your driving, you know, 373 rear end ratio, positive traction, and you did all your driving well below 3,500 RPM. And you could off the line, I could be outrun for a little bit by a Volkswagen. It just had no low-end torque, but it'd go crazy at 3,500 RPM, or really over 3,000. And I love cars with torquey motors. I'm a big block guy, or supercharged, which is the way I've gone for about the last 10 years. And that will give you all the torque you need, and you can afford to feed it. So I think I've had enough of an old buzzard. Wake up, Beard. WF2U and the group KZ4 Bravo, over.
Yeah, KZ4B, this is WF2U. Very good, John, and interesting story. Anyway, well, talking about military vibrators from the World War II era that can handle like 20-watt transmitters with a high voltage. There are several models. I don't think they are available nowadays. Also, there is an Italian guy, I can find his address, that makes solid-state substitutes for those military radio vibrators, also to about the same power level, about 20 watts output transmitters that use them mainly low VHF from the U.S. side, and some HF radios that were used by the other allies, like the UK and the British Commonwealth in general. So you can find those vibrators either with 6, 12, or 24 volt input. But of course you need the transformer and everything else with it. And Steve, as to your question about what the difference is between a dynamotor and a motor generator is this: the dynamotor has the generator windings on the same rotor as the motor winding, and so it's just one rotor. And the motor generator is an electric motor that rotates from that is powered by the input voltage, and it has just a common shaft to a generator. The generator is not the motor, and the motor is not the generator. It's just they are connected with a shaft, and that's the difference between them. I have the big 200. What is it? No, it's 400. I have a 250 watt U.S. Navy transmitter that I need to finish restoring, and I have the motor generator for it. That the primary voltage is 110 volt DC, and I'm still looking for something to cobble together, like a rectifier that is good for about 60 amps from the 120 volt AC supply to run that. No, actually, the transmitter is 400 watts to run the motor generator. Otherwise, I'll have to build a regular AC power supply for it. Anyway, so that's the story. I used back in the 60s. Back in the 60s, I used to have a Drake TR3 in my car, and I had the DC supply with it, and I was in the service then, and when I was not out in the field, but in the officer quarters, I just parked the car outside the door, and used the AC supply. Otherwise, if I was just driving and traveling, I had used a DC supply with it and did a lot of DX actually. So that's the story from this end. So Steve, you pick it up, and 4LQ, this is WF2U.
Okay, WF2U in the group, N4LQ. Do we have any late check-ins? All right. Man, oh man, what a bunch of material we have to talk about tonight. A Z28 Camaro. I remember, and I'll never forget the first time I saw one. I had a 65 Mustang convertible, 289, 3 on the floor. Very simple, had a 4-barrel carburetor. So it was pretty peppy, I thought. I was getting gas one day, and this guy pulled in, and I heard the awfulest racket, and it was a Z28. And I went over there and looked at that thing. I talked to the guy. It was brand new, and that thing would hardly run. It was just, it had these high lift cams, and it was just lopping and lobing and coughing and spitting and carrying on like a race car. I thought, I can't believe somebody made a car like this, but according to him, man, that's the way it was supposed to be. But I wasn't really too impressed with that. I thought, well, it's got its purpose, but not for everyday living. So that was the first time I saw a Z28, and that would have been, I think it's 67 or 8, 67 probably. I don't know. Yeah, probably 67. I don't know when they came out, but it was after the Mustang. I know that. So that's that. And thanks for the description of the Dynamotor. I was sitting here kind of looking on the internet about that, and let's see, the Dynamotor, 1918, some guy in Paris invented the first starter, the Dynamotor. They called the starter a Dynamotor? Well, that's not the same thing. Anyway, there's a company out existing now called Dynamotors that makes Dynamotors. Anyway, yeah, the old cars had so many problems. The day you bought them, they started rusting. And back in the 50s and 60s, that's just what they did. And Dad had a '58 Ford that was a year old, and it started rusting out around the headlight rims and rings or whatever, and rocker panels would rust out, and around the windows, and the back window would leak, rain would get in, and rain would get in somehow under the front windshield and come out the heater and drip water on your toes. And boy, cars these days, they're sealed up like a vault. And I remember when the Volkswagens started coming out, their claim was it would float for a long time, and it was amazing. You could slam the door and it was like a refrigerator. And they finally caught on and learned how to make cars a few years ago, I guess, but they're all pretty reliable now. Let's see here. What else was I going to mention? John, I have several vibrators here that some of them came out of 1070s, if you happen to need one, and I have no idea if they're any good or not. I mean, they probably haven't been used for 60 years or so, so I'm sure they're just fine, maybe. So, now, Jim, on this antenna situation, it doesn't really matter what your SWR is. That tuner is matching the impedance, and it should be able to match it and make it appear to be 1-to-1, but it does not affect the antenna's SWR. It does not affect the match between the coax and the balun, or the balun and the antenna. It's all out of whack, and you're just fooling the transmitter. So that antenna, like I said, probably has an impedance. It's a quarter wave on 160, so it should have a low impedance of around 40 to 50 ohms, and you're running it through a 9-to-1 step down, which makes it 9 times lower. So divide 50 by 9, and you're down to like 6 ohms or something. So not only is there all this loss in that unin and the coax because of that mismatch, but the tuner is going to be at its lossiest point with that super low impedance, and you're going to lose probably 25% of your power just in the tuner alone. So what's left will eventually leak out to the antenna, but if you get rid of all that junk, you may not even need the tuner at all. But if you do, it'll have an easy job. So that's like a 5-minute job. I'd go out there with a flashlight and do it now, in spite of the weather. That's just me, though. Okay, over to you, Jim. KO4CTM N4LQ.
Yeah, very good, Steve. I get it. I need to. I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. I'll go out there in the morning and see what I can do about that. I mean, it's I'm sure it's not exactly right, but it was getting the job done better than what I had before, because I guess the first few times that I was on 160, it really wasn't working very well at all. So yeah, we'll try and go without anything there. I'll go out tomorrow and put that in place and see how it works out. As far as the cars go, I guess the car that I own that I like the best was my 260Z. I think it was like a 1974 260Z, straight 6-cylinder, dual carburetors. That thing would fly. It was that good old-fashioned orange, the Datsun orange, and with black interior. But that thing would get up and go. It had a 4-speed in it. I guess it was a 4-speed, yeah. And with that straight 6-cylinder, it would get on up the road. But anyway, I guess I'm going to say 7-3 for the evening. It's been great talking to everybody. I'm going to go in here and spend a little time with the XYL and settle down for the evening. But it's great to talk to everybody. Good to hear everybody. So I'll say 7-3, and everybody just have a great evening. And I guess I'll talk to some of you in the morning. But like I said, I'll go out and see about this antenna tomorrow when the sun comes up. I'm not gonna climb up this ladder out here in the dark, but I'll see about that. Maybe we'll try that out tomorrow evening. So on to you, Cliff. WB4NKL. This is KO4 CTM Jim in Climax, North Carolina, 7-3.
KO4 CTM, it's WB4NKL. Okay, Jim, 74 was a nice little vehicle. My uncle had one of those, the Z cars, and they were real nice. That coax will eat up a lot of power. If it's not matched up 50 ohms on each end, it starts getting real lossy. So I'd say that'll make quite a bit of difference there. So I'm looking forward maybe to tomorrow evening hearing a lot stronger signal out of Climax. But of course I hadn't had any trouble copying tonight. You've come through, copied you 100%. But I'm sure that should bring you on up some. I forgot to answer the question on the dynamotor, but Mir took care of that. That was my understanding, that the motor generator was two separate units just coupled together mechanically, and the dynamotor is all on the same shaft. Sort of looks like a transformer if you draw it out, except it's got a field winding. But they did pretty good. We had some. I guess there were motor generators on some of the diesel engines. They had 72-volt system, DC, and we had a motor generator that took that 72 volts and turned a generator that put out 110 volts AC. And then we run a Motorola base station, or 120 volt, wasn't a base station, but it was a 120 volt Motorola unit. They still had some of that stuff around. And when I went to work, and those motor generators, they'd sit there, probably run 24 hours a day forever, 7 days a week. They never did shut them down. And we'd have to go put brushes in them every 3 or 4 years. They'd wire the brushes out, but they'd sit there and run forever. 72 volts DC in, 120 volts, about 500 watts out. And it was sort of low RPM from what I remember. And good deal on the Z28, John. I built a Z28 engine for my Camaro, my 67. I took a 283 truck motor, had the 4-bolt mains, and bored it to 4 inches, and put 327 pistons, and ordered the camshaft from a Chevy dealer. You could get the Z28 camshaft back at that time for $29, and the solid lifters. And you're right, it didn't have any horsepower at all, below about 3,000 RPM. But once you got above that, it really come to life. Set you back in the seat. So you had to do a lot of, if he's going to do any drag racing, you had to do a lot of clutch slipping and get that RPM up and drop the clutch. It was good old days. You can get that much power now with all this fancy stuff they got now without all that hassle. KZ4B is WB4NKL.
Okay, WB4NKL and the group KZ4B. Pardon me, this Cliff. Your description of Z28 motor and Steve's description of Z28, highly accurate, which brings to mind a story. I had a ham buddy that was an engineer that worked with me at Duke Energy. I was a relay engineer, and he was in the planning department, which was, they were more theoretical than we were. And the guy was kind of a Ralph Nader. He didn't even have a driver's license because he was afraid of driving. He would take the bus to work or have his wife take him. I mean, you can imagine that kind of guy. And he had a homebrew transmitter that I wanted to go look at his house to see if I wanted to buy it. And everybody that knew him and knew me said he should not ride with me in my car, that would not turn out well. And they warned Ed, said, do not ride with John. They told me, John, do not carry Ed as a passenger. But Ed decided to let me take him to his house so I could look at this transmitter. And we were going down Park Road, and Ed started bitching about how poorly my Z28 ran, because, you know, at low RPM, it would, just like Steve said, it sounded like it would barely run. It would cough and wheeze and skip and everything you can imagine, because the camshaft just had a ridiculous amount of overlap. And so I got a little fed up with this complaining about the performance of my car, so I slammed it down into second gear at about 60 miles an hour, and we ended up at over 100 going down Park Road. You couldn't do that today, but back then the traffic was considerably lighter, and it was a 4-lane section. And Ed just about opened the door and jumped out of my car. He said, stop the car, I'm not going another inch with you. He did finally let me take him home. But just like everybody predicted, it did not turn out well. And he swore that he would never ride with me again as long as I live. And but I scared him to death and loved every second of it. But I mean, it absolutely had no low end torque. But all the vets that I had subsequent to that had plenty of torque. And I also had a 71 Z28 Camaro that had the 350 cubic inch engine. It was an automatic, and it had plenty of torque. So it just and it would only get about 6,000 miles on a set of spark plugs, because you had to run super high lead gasoline because it had 11-to-1 pistons. And so it would literally eat the spark plug electrodes away. And I'm sure it wasn't doing the valves any good, but that's just the way they were. And it would burn up a set of points. I'd change points every time I'd change plugs. So the maintenance was high, and you had to feed it champagne. It was quite an adventure. That's a car that I'd love to have for financial reasons, but I don't miss it at all. And I love my torque. So, in the story. Let's see, what else was I going to comment on? I guess Jim is gone, but in anticipation of getting my BTA 1R1 broadcast transmitter on the air, which I may or may not make it, but the resonant 80-meter antenna that I talk on with the downstairs rig has no balun at all whatsoever. And I could probably put a guanella balun in it that might live, but this lot that my house is sitting on is sloping, and so the antenna would not be perfectly balanced, or even near perfectly balanced. And so I think there's no way a W2DU balun would survive 2 seconds. And so no balun. And but it seems to work fine, and with 150 feet of coax in conduit, mostly buried, no RF makes it to the shack. It's just, I'm sure it's all, anything that's on the shield is bled off the ground. So, on that note, I guess that's, I was going to comment on the dyno motor, but it was, Mir said it right to begin with. It needs no further comment. So Mir, take it away, and you are sounding good tonight. Everybody is, and even Jim came up this last transmission. I think, generally speaking, on the low bands, later is better as far as propagation. So, WF2U in the group, KZ4B, over.
Yeah, Roger, John, KZ4B and the net, this is WF2U. Yeah, well, it's way past my time. I have to go in and let the dogs out for a little bit before I put them in the room and go to sleep in their crates. So 73, everybody. It was a nice discussion and interesting. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be here, and there wouldn't be much static, although it's going to be raining. But probably not too late. I think the rain should be stopping about early evening or late afternoon or something. I think it starts at about 4 a.m. this morning. So 73, all have a good night. Take care, and we'll be here again tomorrow night, hopefully. So N4LQ, thanks for running the net, Steve, and good night, everybody. This is WF2U 73.
Okay, Mir. I'm glad you can make it out tonight. Looks like tomorrow's going to be a rainy day. This is N4LQ. And who knows, it may be raining this time tomorrow night, but I think most of it is going to occur right during the middle of the day, and it's going to be quite a bit, maybe an inch of rain. I don't expect any thunderstorms, just water. So there you go. I just ordered a router. I've been renting the router from, I don't know why, but I just felt like I should for some reason, but from Spectrum, and they installed the modem in the router, and I haven't really had any problem with it, but they were charging me $7 a month, and they raised my cable bill again by $3. I said, okay, I'm getting rid of the router. I'll double that and get rid of that $7 a month charge. So I just ordered what looks like Amazon's favorite one, and we'll try that, see what happens. It's going to come in tomorrow. Yeah, next day shipping. Can you believe that? Just love it. All righty. Well, I guess I'm just about to wind down here also, and we'll go ahead and pass around for some 73s if anybody's left. I guess Cliff and John are all that's left of the group. So go ahead, Cliff, and thanks everybody for coming by tonight. Enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. WB4NKL, N4LQ.
Okay, recognizing Bruce. N4LQ, WB4NKL. Okay, John, I'd like to hear more about your BTA RCA transmitter sometime. I'm taking possession of a BTA1M, I think it's a model number of it. It's got 833s, modulated by 833s. And I'm supposed to pick that up a couple of weeks. I wonder if that's what you've got, how much, what band you're going to put it on, how much trouble. Of course, it's probably a long discussion. We can put that off till later because I hadn't got the transmitter yet. and it's probably going to be a long discussion. I'm thinking if you got the same transmitter. Just curious what you'd run into, but we can talk about it later. Go ahead, John, and turn it over to Bruce. Let's see how he's doing. KZ4B, WB4NKL.
Okay, WB4NKL on the group KZ4B Pine Cliff. We have two different animals. The 1R1 uses a pair of 4-400s in parallel, modulated by a pair of 400s and push-pull. Those are tetrodes, of course. So it's a whole different animal from your 833 transmitter. And the 1R1 was the earliest 1Rs had rectifier tubes. The 1R1 had a gazillion 600-volt top hat rectifiers, which I'm eliminating in favor of these high voltage rectifier blocks. And so it's just a whole different animal. And mine, I looked into a B&W 160 through 10 meter tank coil, and so it's supposed to be 160 through 10. And I plan on not trying to neutralize the tube, so I'm sure on 160 and 80 I'll be all right. But on 40 and above, I'm not sure how well it's going to work unneutralized. I'm using some hellaciously large surge or parasitic suppressor capacitors. They're like 35 watt resistors and coils. They're 35 watts each, so I'm hoping that'll do the trick. But anyway, and I'm using bread slicer capacitors. I've got a 0 to 150 picofarad for the high plate tuning, and I've got a bunch of big ceramic doorknobs in parallel for different bands. There you go. I have trouble with this desk mic. My thumb slips and hits the up-down. That's what screwed me up the other night. Anyway, I won't ramble on anymore, but it also has the Power field modulation transformer hermetically sealed, and but it's less than a gallon, so it's legal. And and now the guy that broke in, I didn't get his call. So whoever it goes to, take it. 73s enjoyed it tonight, and we'll see you guys Sunday, Lord willing. KZ4B over.
Okay, K4ZB, N4WD. Drop in real quick. Been listening. It's static. Crashes are doing me in. Everybody sounds a lot better than last night, but not as good as it has been. Going to sit around and listen and see if I can catch the HARP guys out of University of Alaska doing their sky warming tonight. They got about 6 different frequencies they're going to be popping in and out on. So everyone have a good evening and a good rest of the night, and a blessed day tomorrow, and we'll catch you tomorrow night. Good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. N4LQ, N4WD. 3.
Okay, Bruce. I'm glad you could stop by for a minute and say howdy. We'll talk to you later. This is N4LQ, closing the net, 73.
73s, and you're sounding good up here tonight, Bruce. Catch you all guys later. It's WB4NKL now, clear.
Thanks for calling me in.